Hi, it's wonderful to be with you. I'm Lark Eshelman, or Dr. Lark, as the kids call me. And this presentation is about something that I've learned about recently and I'm very excited about. It's called Consensograms. And it's a learning or teaching technique that I think is very fun and engaging and really helpful to those of us who teach. Thanks for being with me today as we look at this together. So consensograms are pretty much what they sound like. They're a way of gathering information about what your audience, in most cases, I would think this is the students then in your class, what they might already know about the topic that you're introducing, or what they guess or think they know about the topic. And it's a way for them also to stand up and get physically engaged in learning about this topic as you're introducing it. How it works is that we put poster paper around the room with a question at the top of each poster paper and columns underneath. Kids have markers or sticky notes and they vote or guess what they think the correct answer is. So you get an idea right away of what the class thinks about the topic, whether they're on target or wildly wrong or all over the place. And they have the opportunity to anonymously and without being called on or feeling uncomfortable having to make a guess out loud in front of everybody, they get to anonymously get up, physically go up to the white papers around the room and make a vote. And we know that physical interaction or activity can very much support good learning and good attention and engagement. So they're invested right from the beginning. You get an idea of where the kids are, what they know. And then you can use that measure at the end to repeat the consensogram activities to see if your teaching has helped them to learn about the topic that you're introducing. I'm going to give you just a quick example. Let's say that the topic is communication among different cultures, how we need to understand different cultures and how that can enrich our learning or understanding about a topic. So the consensogram paper might look like this. Okay, class, there are 24 students in our class. I want you to guess how many of our students in this class were born in this school district and how many came from outside. So check how many you think were born here. Here's your marker or your sticky notes. The columns are 1 to 8. You guess 1 to 8 students in our class were born here, 9 to 16, or the third column might be 17 to 24. Put your mark or your sticky note under the column that you think is the correct answer. You have an idea then of you're engaging your kids in thinking about this topic, and you have an idea of what they might think. It gives you a quick entree into the topic because now you're talking about them and they've been physically engaged without feeling like they've been put on the spot. We'll talk about more examples during the podcast with Mrs. Bruno. So now it's time to introduce Mrs. Bruno, our featured guest for today. Rachel Bruno has been with the Donegal School District in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania for 3 years, serving as the principal of the intermediate school, which in Donegal is students grades 3 through 6. Before working at Donegal, she served as a classroom teacher and as an instructional coach and assistant principal at the Eastern Lancaster County School District. Rachel's true passion lies in the area of learning and helping to empower others through the learning process. She believes, as I do, that relationships are at the core of education and that healthy relationships can foster a healthy learning environment which feels safe and welcoming to students. Through working with Rachel Bruno, I know that you too will feel excited in the learning environment that she has created in our presentation today. Let's get started. Good morning.
Good
It's nice to
morning.
see you.
Good to see you too.
Rachel Bruno, Mrs. Rachel Bruno, who is school principal, which I used to be. So I'm feeling very connected to this woman, Donegal School District in Mount Joy, Pennsylvania. Very much of a pleasure to welcome you this morning.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I'm excited about what we're going to share about today.
Me too, because I teach a lot, but there are some techniques that work so well for teaching, and I learned a new one from you, and I'm excited to share it also, because consensograms are consensograms. Well, we'll find out what they are. But I'd like to try something, Rachel, if you feel that you're okay with this.
Sure.
I'd like to do a little consensogram with our listeners today.
Let's try it.
Okay. I love your enthusiasm. It's wonderful. So for those of you who are listening or watching, I would like for you, if you would be willing, I'm inviting you to imagine what it could be. What is a consensogram? What are we going to be talking about? Take a minute to just imagine in your mind what it might be, and maybe even jot it down. This is a kind of a game, but you know what? I don't think we play enough these days anyway, so let's play a little bit. Jot down what you think it might be, and then we'll come back to it later and check it out. If you think you have a definition for consensogram and you think it makes sense given how the word is put together, what the parts of the word mean or are, how might it help you? How might it be used? What could be the use of this or the good of this? And jot some of those ideas down too. And then let's measure them against everything we're going to learn with Rachel Bruno this morning or today. So Rachel, I watched you and heard the responses you got when you were using consensograms with your staff. And I thought, wow, how wonderful to engage your teachers, your faculty, in a way that made them excited. I saw the pictures. They were really into it. In this day and age, sometimes it's hard to get people real excited about new learning.
Yeah, it was exciting to see people up on their feet, interacting with each other, smiling in really natural, organic conversation. So it was the perfect activity for this type of learning.
So we're going to get into what it is. And I wonder, do you have a definition that you particularly like, or how would you explain it to someone who doesn't know what a consensogram is? And I know we can take the word apart into sections, and maybe our listeners will be saying, oh, I got that part right. Oh, no, I missed that part. Or maybe they got it in one. Who knows? Let's see.
Yeah, it definitely makes me think of that word study concept. So we hear that consensus and the gram part. So it's really looking for a theme that comes out in a visual format. So consensograms usually are posted in a physical format, but lately they've even been in the digital world. So they are posted for people with a question format that they're able to then respond to in order to understand prior learning, get a pre-assessment on people, engage individuals, and get a pulse on what their attitudes or thinking are about a concept.
So something I missed when I was hoping to engage our listeners is I didn't ask them if they already knew what it was. And is that part of the whole theme of Consensogram? This is all about learning, how we can engage people to learn. Should I have asked first, for example, do you already know what it is? Or have you used this before?
That was one of the things that we looked at with our consensograms in a way was how do we build from simple questions or even non-threatening questions and then up to some questions that were a little bit more heavy and more linked to the topic that we were going to talk about that day. So we almost wanted this gradual increase in the questions. So that's kind of like what you're talking about. Should have we started this morning with just a simple yes and no, and then ask for the deeper level question. So that probably would have been a good format.
Is there a benefit, Rachel, in asking people something like, what did you have for breakfast? Or is it
Yes.
not that simple? I'm wondering, it seems to me, and correct me here if I'm wrong, that part of the idea of the power of consensogram in terms of a teaching technique is that the value is, a great value is in engaging people in the beginning.
Yes, and that's definitely one of the things we were looking at. We were on a long winter break and students and staff came back on January 2nd and this meeting was January 3rd. So we wanted something to say, whew, Happy New Year. Welcome back. Let's get excited and moving for the new year. So it was something that we strategically picked for the time of the year. And absolutely, starting with questions that are really non-threatening helps to build the environment and build that culture, whether it's between students or staff. So for example, one of the questions we asked was, did you set a New Year's resolution? And if you can visualize, the poster was divided into quadrants, and it was yes to do something, yes to stop something, no or other. And so what we did was each staff member got 5 stickers. We did snowflakes to go with the winter theme. And they went around to the 5 different posters that we had in the room and placed that sticker in the area that matched on that poster. So did you set a New Year's resolution? They were able to just simply answer that question, non-threatening, not really related to school necessarily, but it also just gave us a pulse on who are we connecting with, how was their break, and do we have something in common with other people when they're answering?
That's a lot. Those are a lot of different elements that come together in one activity. I was looking at my paper because I had some pictures that you were kind enough to send me from your activity. And I remember seeing weather as part of one of the ways to engage people. Maybe that was the snowflakes.
Yes. We also did a check-in. So it was just, how do you feel today? And so there were 5 or 6, I think it was 5 different snowmen. And so it was, how do you feel today? And there was a snowman that was standing on his head, looking kind of goofy. There was a half melted snowman, if you could imagine it. So we had 5 different snowmen and just were asking people to check in. And that's really powerful. It's something that we want to see in our classrooms when we're checking in with students. The value of this activity, and it could be structured differently, was we didn't know whose snowflake was whose, but we just got a general feel for how was everybody doing. I have seen some classrooms where students will decorate like their own chip, like little token, and the teacher has a key that shows the picture of what the chip is and that it's coded to Rachel. So the teacher knows that Rachel's token looks like a sun or whatever I chose to decorate it as. So I would know as a teacher, but the students don't know one another. We didn't do that for this activity. We really were just looking for generalizations and a general theme of how the staff was doing and their knowledge base. But yes, one of them was about, was the snowman activity. And again, fairly non-threatening, not specific to the topic we talked about, but just to sort of gain comfort level and build the culture.
I think I'm hearing, and correct me or direct me if I'm wrong, but I think what I'm hearing is 2 things, and we haven't started on the second yet, which is, what is the topic we're trying to teach or learn about or share information about? But the first is the best way, perhaps, or an important way to engage students when you have something to share with them or teach them is to first of all, get them on their feet or physically moving or involved. And secondly, find things that they have in common with each other or that they are excited to share with you. Like, I did this on my vacation, or I can't stand it when it's snowing out, or I love it when the sun is shining, so that you're asking them to tell you, or in a sense, give you a piece of themselves so that they're opening up a little bit before you start talking about the topic. Is this, now my field is psychology, so I'm just really curious, do you know even if there's a psychological underpinning to how this technique brings people to a point where they're going to be more receptive to the learning that you're sharing, to the information?
I know when I researched and looked into it, one of the elements that came about was people feeling valued. Because
Okay.
everybody gets to put their mark on the paper, whether it's they go up and put a star with a marker, put a sticker, put a post-it, whatever it might be. Everybody gets a voice. So there's that concept of feeling valued, feeling important, feeling part of the whole community. So a lot of that was shared ahead of time. And again, the concept of starting with those lighter questions and building to the heavier questions is building confidence in the students. And any time that we can have a chance to build culture and relationships is time well spent.
Here, here. Very happy to hear you say that. All about relationships, in schools, of course, should be all about relationships. The more safe we feel, the more valued we feel, the better we learn. So thank you for that. So if we move on then to the idea that, okay, you're using a technique called consensograms in order to have the best chance you can of sharing the important information that you have to share.
Yep.
We're right. We're on the same path here.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So if the information you had in this particular exercise with faculty rather than with students, but I'm assuming that your idea was help the faculty learn it by practicing it and then hoping that the faculty will use it with their students in their classrooms.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love to model different strategies because seeing is believing. You get a taste of how it felt as the learner and then can replicate that or adapt it in your classroom.
Let's make sure before we end this conversation that you tell me how well you think that worked and how you know whether teachers felt good about it and are using it in their classrooms.
Well, some anecdotal. In the moment, there was laughter. There was communication between people. We have all of our teaching staff present for these faculty meetings. So there was intermingling between people that wouldn't typically have an opportunity to talk on a daily basis. So that was really powerful. Hearing the smiles, the laughter, those types of things stand out. Everybody was up and participating. And that's another big element too. And then being able to see how some teachers took it into their classrooms and even just the simple one of the check-in, how are you doing today? And using that in their classrooms to check in on the students. So that was the one I saw most frequently used afterwards. And I'm hopeful that more people will find the right spot. We do talk about how instructional strategies might not fit every lesson. So don't force it. You've got to find the right one for the right moment.
Right. Which leads pretty easily then fluidly into the next question, which is you used this format, this instructional tool of consensograms to discuss the topic of trauma, which is how you and I know each other because I have come in with instructional information about trauma in schools. Who brings it into the school? How does it play out? What does it look like? And how do we address it basically? So I was particularly excited that you were using a technique to check in with your faculty about the topic of trauma, because it seemed to me that making it a personal interaction in that time with your faculty would be important when you're talking about such a sensitive issue. But I'm curious to ask, how did you choose consensogram to go along with your discussion of trauma? Was there some reason that you felt the technique of consensogram might work really well when you were discussing this topic of how much did they understand about trauma in schools and what we hope will happen to make learning easier for kids who come in with traumatic backgrounds?
Yes. So we were really excited to be able to kind of loop back to the trauma work that we've been doing with you. We've been blessed to have you talk to us about lots of strategies to use in the classroom, what it looks like, feels like, sounds like for some of these students that are coming with trauma backgrounds. And we wanted to revisit because we hadn't seen you in some time and just make sure it was fresh in everybody's minds. They do a lot of great things already, but then it's also really wonderful to share ideas. So that was our big focus of the day, was to be able to really highlight past learning and share strategies that they've tried or that colleagues have tried so that they had some new ones to add to their toolbox. So with this, we really wanted to think about the why. So why are we spending this time talking about it? Why is it important and why does it have an impact? So one of the questions we asked was, of the students you teach, how many are you aware of coming with a trauma background? And so that question was really powerful. So if you can visualize it, we sort of had a scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, or more, and teachers put their stickers down. And it was overwhelming. And this is what we predicted would happen. The amount of stickers were in the 4+ category. And so that right there was our why. Why are we talking about this? Because of the amount of students that we have coming with trauma. And another question we wanted was, how comfortable or how equipped do you feel supporting students with trauma? And so that one we were sort of using as a pre-assessment. So one of them we wanted to pre-assess and understand, okay, where are they? How do they feel about this? And that one was more of a scale that they could put their sticker anywhere on that scale. And then how many students do you have that have experienced trauma, and really that why behind why are we spending our time today? Why are we spending our time throughout the year learning about this?
You know why that's especially important to me, Rachel, and I so appreciate that you gave that the thought that you did and made the plan that you did, because much of my career, I have been talking with people in various fields, including education, about trauma and how it shows up, why it happens, how we can address it. But when you do what I call a drive-by training, when you sort of drop in out of the sky and you don't know the people you're working with, whom you're working, and you share what you know is important information, but your audience hasn't developed a trust with you yet. They don't know that you know what you're talking about, and they really don't maybe have the investment to try it out after you leave. And as the trainer, the educator, the person who's coming in with what I believe is critically important information, I have no idea afterwards whether anybody tried it or used it. So for me, it was so exciting when I heard that you were doing this, because you just touched on the reasons why this is so helpful to me. Since I'm working with Donegal School District on an ongoing basis, which is such a gift. Oh my gosh, such a gift to me. Oh, so
and us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. But I get to know you. I get to see the new learning in action, or if there are hiccups or misunderstandings, or I need more information, whoever is asking, then I'm there, which just is such a thrill. You did my homework for me. And you did it in a great way, because you were able to talk to the teachers, engage them, talk to them about the topic, have them do guesses, which is what we did with our audience in the beginning of our podcast today.
Yep.
Can you guess? What is it that we're talking about? And you asked them questions that engage their guessing, or their, more to the point, their knowledge of their students based on what we're talking about. If you didn't know what trauma was, how would you know how many of your kids had it? So it's a step-by-step, and you're coaching your teachers, your faculty, on how to use the information that we're trying to share and teach in the classroom with their own enthusiasm and confidence that they can do what we're hoping they can do. Very exciting to me. So you chose Consensogram to use with a topic that is kind of a little disconcerting for some people. They don't like to talk about it. And you engage them in the beginning. And then I'm curious, was there a particular, what exactly were you hoping you would learn from what they shared with you that you could take away and perhaps share with me, or share with, or do follow up with your faculty about what's the next step? What might be the best questions, the most important questions you were hoping to get answers to?
From the whole session or just the consensograms part?
I'm thinking now of consensograms, but of course you can share anything that you feel is pertinent.
I think for me, I think it hit home with a lot of people to see how many students in a classroom are impacted by trauma, that it really creates that sense of urgency. Why are we learning about this? And when we focus on that why, that's what's going to continue to drive us. And then the other element that really helped me was understanding that people felt slightly comfortable in supporting students of trauma. And I think that has grown. I almost wish I could have done this earlier before we have had our trainings with you, because I think it would have been the data would be different. So I think we've really grown. And I think it led us to our next activity, which was more of a group work activity where people went around and added to different posters around the room about tips for trauma. And just being able to hear them talk together, share, I think they know more than they think they know. And it's being able to work together and just using each other as that resource to be able to put it down onto paper to remind us of that.
Awesome. That's really awesome. And you touch on a point here that they're doing it as a group and they're needing to have some confidence in themselves that they can do it. Something that I didn't know about consensograms before. So I'm fortunate that you taught me about this. But something that I think I love about consensograms is that everybody has an equal voice. Mm-hmm. So sometimes when I know this is true working with kids, it's true working with faculty. Sometimes there are people who are more eager than others to share, and they can sometimes even take over a conversation without meaning to or realize what's happening. And there are other people then who are a little more shy to come forward. This way, everybody has an equal chance to share what they know.
Absolutely.
If they want.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to that concept of feeling valued. So it really hit a lot of different things. It was engaging. It was fairly quick. It was able to give value to everybody's voice that was in the room, gave us kind of pre-assessment knowledge, and created the sense of urgency that we needed. So for this activity, it really hit on all the things that we were hoping it would.
How long was that activity, just as a point of reference?
I would say it's going to be an awkward 7 minutes. It definitely was, I would say maybe a little bit more than 5, but definitely less than 10. We have about 70 people at our faculty meetings. And what wound up happening is that teachers would kind of stop and talk at the different spots and different posters. And so we let that happen organically. And again, that's where some of the laughter came up. And connections of, oh, you stopped something for a New Year's resolution? I've never thought of that before. What did you stop? So it was just good to hear the dialogue. So this, for about 70 people, I would say was about 5 to 7 minutes.
That's like no time at all to get such an engagement. Wow.
Yes. Yep.
And solid information.
Yeah,
Gosh.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. How much of a factor do you think it is that people had to stand up? I'm thinking in particular of social emotional learning and how much we now understand that movement is a really critical part of learning or engagement. Do you think that it was more or less of a factor in getting people to express themselves?
I think it was more. I oftentimes, it's easy to hide behind a screen, or kind of like what you shared. If in a small group, somebody's voice might be louder, you might be more intimidated, but everybody was able to participate. Everybody got up moving. And I think that was really good. Our faculty meetings start at 7:30. So it was also nice and early. So people got the blood pumping and moving a little bit as they walked around and smiling, those endorphins going. So I think it was really important that we did start with something that was a little bit more kinesthetic, and what everybody then was able to participate.
And I suppose they carried their coffee around with them if they needed to.
Yep, some of them did.
That would be me.
Me too.
So Rachel, I'm curious, when you started this exercise with your faculty, and I hear that it went well, what were you hoping would happen, and did it happen, or is there more to this story? Like, we'd like to follow up, or no, you accomplished what you hoped to accomplish?
I hoped that it would engage people. I think we did that. I'd hoped that it would really set the stage for the bulk portion of our faculty meeting or session, and it did that. It told us our pre-assessment data about how comfortable people felt, and it also created that sense of urgency about why we were focusing on it. The one area I'd like to revisit is, are people then using this? So when we do these, we try to incorporate different strategies in hopes of teachers trying them. And this could even be something that maybe families are trying at home in different formats and in different ways. So my next step would be to follow up on that, or maybe to check in with teachers to see, have you thought about trying it? Where have you tried it? Or where do you think you could try it? So that's one of the areas I'd like to revisit. But the other ones, I think we were very successful that day.
If I were to use this, and I'm hoping that our listeners are thinking about how does this apply to me? How might I be able to use this, or incorporate this as a tool into my life or my work? If you were to think about this as, okay, we're looking at a pre-assessment of trauma. How much did you know? How much do you know? Are you ready to incorporate your new learning in teaching? Could you give us an example of how your teachers might use this in a classroom?
They definitely could use this with content when they are pre-assessing. So how much do you know, or where do you think these people lived at this time? And being able to do that again in the non-threatening format, that this sticker, this Post-it isn't necessarily tied to me. It's just giving my teacher information. I really also could see it, and a lot of what I read about was at the beginning of a school year, in getting to know the students, building that sense of community. So maybe it's something that's as simple as, what subject is your favorite? And being able to get a pulse on the class as a whole. So I can definitely see those things. I would be interested to talk to families after maybe listening to this to see what their thoughts are. One of the other ones I see most frequently in the classrooms that I could see transfer over is the "how are you doing today?" question. And that could be something that's simply posted at home too, as we're teaching our kids about our bodies and how they react and how they respond to different emotions, and teaching especially the little kids about, okay, if my body feels like this is the emotion that matches it sometimes. And so being self-aware and teaching that, and understanding that, you know what, even moms and dads, grandmas, uncles, aunts have bad days too. So maybe as I'm leaving the door, it might not be on the happy snowman. Maybe it's kind of on the half melted one, but that's okay. And here's why it's okay. So being able to model that, talk about it, using it as a conversation starter in the home, as well as in the classroom too.
I'm getting pictures in my own mind of teachers using Consensogram in the classroom. And I think you described two different ways that make me very excited about wanting to talk with more of your teachers about how else they can use it. So one of them might be, for example, at the beginning of a unit, a social studies unit on ancient people.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know about that yet? Before we even start. And now we're going back to the name Consensogram. So we're going to get a consensus, if I'm correct, of what the class knows. This is the pre-learning, or what would you call it in the?
Pre-assessment.
Pre-assessment, okay. So how much, let's do a consensus of how much you all already know. And you're also then engaging them in sort of the game of guessing. Let's take our best shot at this.
Yeah.
And then you have them kind of with you.
Yeah. And it's even, I could even see it being, maybe you take these visuals down, and then at the end of the unit, you put them back up. And maybe now they're getting a different color that they're responding in, and we're seeing the change. Or it's just, let's look back to before we started learning about this. This is where we were. Now think about where you are now. So even revisiting that at the end of a unit would be really powerful.
So how far we've come.
Yes. Yep.
How much more you know now. How much broader your understanding is, which must be, I don't actually remember that as a student. I don't know. Did you ever have were your teachers ever at the end of a unit saying, wow, look how far you've come. We've all learned so much more. That's exciting.
Yeah, I think it would be. There's a strategy of using an anticipatory set, and they get the same set of questions at the beginning, at the end, and they get to kind of anticipate, what am I learning about? How much do I know about it? And then they get to revisit those same questions. So it's almost like the concept of blending those two together.
Right. Interesting. So I think I'm going to start thinking about how I can incorporate it into my teaching, because, we get our assessments at the end, and often there's a little test, but the group is not still in front of you when you're looking at that information. So you can't just turn around and say, oh my gosh, you've learned so much. This is so exciting to me. And yet, when you're in a classroom with kids, you can do that if you have a format, and here's a really fun format, a way to do it. That's exciting.
Definitely. Yeah.
And then the other way that you sort of hinted this could be used is with families. And I would love to do a follow-up with you where we could talk to a few families, ask them if they're willing to try, and then engage with them and how it went. If you were to talk to a family, well, you're a mom, you and your family, how might you imagine using Consensogram with your family at home? Is there an example you might give? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
that's okay. My son is 3. He'll be 4 in June. So I do think about the emotional part of, how do you feel today? So that simple example I shared before, and being able to know as a family, how are we doing? And modeling too, that on days that you're not feeling okay, that's okay too. Or also doing it as you're leaving for the day and then coming home at night, and maybe something's changed, and what helped your day change, and using those as conversation points. We're also in the heat of learning sight words and letters and things like that. So I'm trying, my head's starting to spin about, could this be used with something like that? So I haven't nailed it down yet, but I'm sure that there are other ways to use it. And I'd be interested to talk to other families as they learn about this and what they're thinking and the different ideas that they have. Maybe it's how they choose their family vacation. So it's a blind vote. Here's 3 different choices, and go ahead and put your sticker or Post-it note, and maybe it's a wild summer.
It could be very wild if you have, yes. I can imagine that. By the way, there's a really fun book about, of course, my field is child trauma. So I refer to books all the time. And I used to be a school librarian. That was my very first professional job, which I just loved. It was so fun. But I believe that there's a real power in reading books. And there's a book called Grumpy Monkey. I don't know if you know it.
Yeah. Yes, that's a silly one. I like that one.
So good about, he's grumpy and everybody responds to his grumpiness. But in the end, well, sometimes I'm just grumpy. And it's good for doing what you're talking about, which is normalizing ebb and flow of feelings, up and down of feelings, but also helping people, children, teens, adults, learn not just that it's okay, but also what influences our feelings.
Absolutely.
Pretty powerful.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could imagine a family saying, for example, we need to expand. We're going to put an expansion on our house, and we don't really know what we need. So we're going to put up sticky notes on the wall with your little, you have the chance to stick on the wall under the certain, on the certain page. Where do you feel that we are the most uncomfortable? Is it in the kitchen where it's too small, or your bedroom that you have to share with your sibling, or the living room where everybody doesn't get a comfortable seat when we're watching a movie, or where is it? And you can put your sticky notes up. And then let's talk about, okay, well then I'm not sure how you would follow that along, but maybe a consensus, we're talking about a consensus and input. Might that be something, an example of how we might begin to help our kids in our family feel that they have a voice? Absolutely. And think about what the choices are. So it's not just mom and dad saying, okay, we're going to expand the living room. well,
Yeah.
maybe that's not the most important thing to our kids. Let's listen to this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that can kind of go hand in hand with problem solving. So we're kind of building problem solving skills through something like this and talking about the concept too of not everybody is going to get their pick, but
Mm.
sometimes we have to go with what can we live with? What can we go to bed at night okay with? And I think it could be anything from family game night, let's pick the game we play, to a house edition or a vacation, and using it to create that sense of comfort and that environment where they do feel like they are valued and that their voice is heard.
And that's exactly a point that I want to emphasize. Being someone who has worked therapeutically with families a lot over numbers of years, I think it's still a shock to some people that there are often members of a family who don't feel they have a voice. Mm. Even if parents say on a routine basis, well, tell us what you want, that child or family member may not feel that they have that voice. And so the opportunity to put it on a sticky note or draw it on a picture and put it up there where everybody can see it without having to voice the words. And very often they don't know the words that they want to voice. Yeah. They don't know how to express themselves, but they might on a picture, or they might just going to that picture that you've already put up, say, this is the one, this is how I feel. So how wonderful in a family or in school for everyone to have that opportunity for their voices to be heard.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I'm liking this style of working, of teaching more and more as we talk about it. I'm increasingly excited about it. I'm curious now, before we end, if you would share with us, in terms of you as a principal, empowering your teachers to help understand their students, especially their students who have experienced trauma, so that they can be better learners, which is kind of the step-by-step of where we hope to go. Do you see other roles for consensograms in this particular topic of not learning about trauma, but your teachers learning, how can I incorporate understanding of how best to help our students who have experienced early trauma?
Yes, and that was one of the things that we even stated at the training, was looking at this type of strategy, some of the non-threatening questions versus the more content-specific questions. So building up that comfort, the concept of semi-anonymous, and the fact that we weren't necessarily watching, or nobody knew whose snowflakes were who as they put their snowflake stickers on. Now, they were in groups as they traveled, because naturally they sort of flowed like that. But being able to take your name off of it, but still get your opportunity to voice your thoughts, was less intimidating. So some of those things were really important to point out as we're supporting our students, and it's good for all students. And even though a lot of the majority of our teachers noted that they have 4 or more students that they work with that have experienced trauma, there's probably some out there that we don't even know what their background is fully. So being able to have an understanding and an awareness of how these strategies are supportive for all learners.
Thanks for all of those ideas or those thoughts. They are so very important, and you're absolutely right. And I'm really excited to hear you say it, because it means our conversations about trauma have been getting through to you, and you've been sharing them with your faculty, but so many students who do experience trauma, and you're right, many of them will never know what they've been through, they are restricted for whatever reasons. They self-restrict sharing that information. They're worried about not telling, getting in trouble if they tell, or they're worried about if they tell their parents, whom they may be afraid of, but who they love, will be taken away, or they're worried. There are 1,000 reasons why kids can be afraid to share that information. And so it's important for us to be especially sensitive. And one way to do that, as I'm learning from you, is to use consensograms so they have an opportunity to share how they feel without worrying that they're going to get in trouble for it or get somebody else in trouble for it. And yet they can express the feeling. And then you learn as teacher or principal, yeah, there's a lot going on in this classroom that we need to address. Very exciting to me. This is so wonderful. And I'm going to think of a thousand ways now. I'm sure I'll be driving down the street and saying, oh, I could use a consensogram in this way. And certainly you will see me when we do more training at Donegal School District using consensograms in our faculty training. Absolutely. And I hope you will help me to do that.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm excited because although this is one way and we've shared a couple today, I think that this will lend itself to other formats. And so I'm excited to see what other people do with it.
Will you share more of that with us as you go along? I'd love to check back in with you.
Yes, I'd love to.
That'd be awesome. I'm going to be adding a little bit of here's what we thought about today at the end. But Rachel, I just think what you're doing is very exciting. The fact that you're bringing new ways, new methods, new insights to how you can help your faculty be better at what they do gives me great confidence in how well things are going at Donegal School District. I love the district. Thank you. Me too. Very happy.
I'm honored to serve here, and we're so grateful to have you and to be able to focus on this. And I meant what I said is, that concept of a one-hit wonder training or the drive-by, as you called it, and wanting to make sure that's not the case. So we appreciate that you have been, coming back, and we have multiple sessions so that it does build and we revisit, and everybody's got best intentions, but sometimes our toolboxes get filled with so many different things that we forget what's in there. So I think when we revisit, we're able to just pull that back out and dig in again. And so it's I know people have really appreciated it. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. And I appreciate you saying something about it. It's my joy. I want to emphasize one thing before we wrap here. And that is that you mentioned a few minutes ago, it's important for certain people to have the benefit or the opportunity to share information through consensograms, but it's good for everybody. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I'm so excited to hear you say, because it's true for a lot of our learning when we're talking about trauma. Oh, and you mentioned tips before, trauma-informed practices. For those in our listening audience who don't know that, tips are trauma-informed practices. They're really critically important for children who have experienced trauma, but they're good for everybody. Yep. And now I'm learning that consensograms also are good for everybody. So thank you so much for sharing all of this.
You're Rachel welcome. Bruno. Thank you for having me.
We'll talk again, maybe soon.
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Thanks so much for this.
You're welcome. Yes, I'm excited.
That's awesome. And I'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Boy, that's a lot of information and really helpful and exciting. Since I learned about consensograms, I have to say, I've looked up more examples, and I've actually used consensograms in my own teaching, professional education trainings that I offer to educators and to mental health professionals. And it's fun. It's really great to see teachers get up and school district staff, administrators, mental health professionals get up and get moving first thing and take a chance on voting for their best guess at the answers about our topics. And in case you missed it, I'll reiterate, consensograms are also a great way at the end of a presentation to see how well the group has understood and assimilated the information. You just put up those blank sheets again with the same questions and see how the group answers. Great visual way to make a quick assessment on how well you got your information across. Today's presentation is one of many that we offer as professional development or just simply as a way to learn about fun and engaging ways to perk up both our own teaching and the group of people with whom we are working. very warm thanks to Rachel Bruno for teaching me and us about consensograms. This is Dr. Lark signing off. See you again. Please be well.